I have been involved with ranked choice voting, I think almost since I started serving on the City Council in 2006, which was the same years that voters in Minneapolis approved a ballot initiative by 2/3 of the vote to implement ranked choice voting in the city of Minneapolis. We are now on our third municipal election utilizing ranked choice voting, and I just have to say I am very proud of my city, Minneapolis, of our election staff, and all the people who are participating in this process, candidates and voters. We know that this year we had voter participation that was frankly off the charts for a municipal election, 43%, and it's reported to be the highest for a city election in decades. We believe also that the process of ranked choice voting worked well, that voters understood the process and that they utilized their opportunity to rank choices. And you'll hear more about this and how it served the process well and got us to candidates who were elected with majority vote participation. So I am going to invite forward Jean Massey. She is the Executive Director of Fair Vote Minnesota, and she will give us some highlights from the perspective of Fair Vote on ranked choice voting. And then we have a number of electeds and a couple of candidates who are going to share their perspective in some brief comments about ranked choice voting on their elections, and then we will open for questions. Jean.
Thank you, Councilmember Glidden, and welcome the media to learn more about the impact of ranked choice voting on the election this year. I want to give a bigger thank you to Councilmember Glidden and all of the elected leaders in Minneapolis for helping make ranked choice voting a very successful election system in the city of Minneapolis and the leadership roles that she and others have played in this process. I also want to give a big thank you to the Elections Department of Minneapolis. City Clerk Casey Carl is here in the audience, should you have any questions of him. You may be aware that when this was first implemented in 2009, it took 2 weeks to count all of the ballots. That was reduced to 3 days in 2013 and to 1 day this year. So kudos to Minneapolis for providing that level of efficiency and competency around our elections. And if you've not yet had the chance to check out their fancy graphics on all of these races, please do it there at the Minneapolis Elections website. They really have done an outstanding job and have set a very high standard for conducting ranked choice voting elections across the country. We are so proud to be here today with all of these amazing leaders and to celebrate the impact of ranked choice voting on the Minneapolis elections and St. Paul elections this past Tuesday and throughout the campaign season. We wish congratulations to all of the winners and a big thank you to all of the candidates who have put themselves forward to serve our cities. As Elizabeth said, we've been using ranked choice voting here in Minneapolis since 2009 and since 2011 in St. Paul. And once again, this past Tuesday demonstrated a number of clear victories for democracy that we would like to celebrate today. First, we saw a surge in voter participation and turnout. In fact, it exceeded all of our expectations, with participation the highest it's been in over 2 decades. At a time when turnout in municipal elections is trending downward across the country, more than 100,000 voters came out to cast a ballot in the Minneapolis mayoral race and 61,000 in the St. Paul mayoral election. It is clear that robust competition and real choice made possible by the elimination of the costly low turnout primary process, plus the implementation of ranked choice voting, drives participation. 2, once again, voters have proved that they understand ranked choice voting. Despite concerns about voter confusion, voters in Minneapolis and St. Paul proved that they understood how to rank their ballots and the importance of that process. Nearly 90% of the voters in Minneapolis ranked their ballot in the mayoral race. 75% ranked their ballot in the St. Paul mayoral race. Our Rank Your Vote volunteers, along with the city of Minneapolis, were out at events and forums and at the polling places across the Twin Cities on Election Day, finding that the vast majority of voters found their ballot easy to use and to understand. Again, we would like to send a send a special thank you to the well-prepared election staff and election judges in both cities, as well as our core of Rank Your Vote education staff and volunteers for ensuring voters were well prepared for Election Day. And 3, ranked choice voting has changed how candidates engaged with one another and with the voters. This year demonstrated the power of giving voters more choice in their elections, in both mayoral campaigns and in the city council and park board races. There was a diverse and deep slate of candidates that would not have been possible under the old primary system. The competition fostered engaging, rich, and important conversations about the future of our cities across all of the races. In the end, ranked choice voting resulted in the election of St. Paul's first African-American mayor and the most demographically diverse council and park board in Minneapolis history. Minneapolis Mayor-elect Jacob Frey won with 57% of ballots continuing in the final round, receiving 46,716 first, second, and third choice votes. As we know, Mayor-elect Melvin Carter accomplished an outright victory with 51% of the vote in the first round on election night. All of the candidates in the 2 mayoral campaigns and council races ran overall very civil and issue-oriented campaigns. This approach helped the candidates build broad coalition support and demonstrated the benefit of reaching out for second and third rankings, in addition to first choices. Unfortunately, there were a few outside groups that employed old-fashioned campaign tactics, but these were quickly rebuffed by candidates and the voters alike. We saw that negative campaigning like this backfires under ranked choice voting. This is another benefit of the ranked choice voting electoral system, which rewards candidates with positive messages that resonate with a broad audience. In summary, all of these outcomes are a win for voters no matter the final results. Stay tuned for more analysis about the ranked choice voting process and the election results. We will be doing more briefs as we find out more information. Again, congratulations to all of the winning candidates and to the voters for ranking and engaging the full power of your ballots. Finally, an enormous thank you to all the campaigns for constructively shaping the debates all the way up until Election Day. We are all better for the conversations you've engaged us in. We are excited to now be gearing up to begin a statewide conversation about ranked choice voting and are hopeful that more Minnesota cities will move to adopt this common sense electoral system. Thank you, and I'll be available to answer questions after we have an opportunity to hear from all of the elected officials and candidates that we've invited to participate today.
Thank you, Jean. We are now going to turn to hearing perspective from people who participated as candidates using ranked choice voting. And I just want to say I am so honored that so many of these newly elected and candidates have taken their time to be here to talk about the importance of ranked choice voting in this election. So first we are going to hear some perspective about the mayor's race. This is, I believe, the place where the most voters exercise their opportunity and their right to rank their choices. And we have with us today Mayor-elect Jacob Frey. Welcome, Jacob.
Huge thank you to Vice President Elizabeth Glidden. As you may very well know, Councilmember Glidden was one of the original proponents of ranked choice voting, was steadfast through the process in getting it implemented here in Minneapolis. And a huge thank you as well to Jean Massey, and as you all know, she has been rock solid for a long time and quite clearly the leading voice on ranked choice. A thank you to our city elections department, who went through a record-breaking year in terms of voting, in terms of early votes cast. The first day of early voting was absolutely through the roof, and Mr. Carl, you did an extraordinary job. Thank you so much. And a thank you to all of the candidates, both who were involved in the mayoral race as well as all the council races. I think Minneapolis did what we do best, which is democracy at its finest. We have an activist, engaged population that is fully capable of enacting the change that they all envision, and I think this last Tuesday we proved that in a big way with, what was it, 45%? Was that what it was? 45%. I mean, that is like a 50% uptick, I believe, in the percentage that voted in 2013, and it's not like 2013 was a down year. So I think that is something that we should all collectively be proud of, and I'll be brief. Here's how ranked choice voting ultimately helps. You know, first, you are able to fully support the candidate that you believe in. Now, there was a lot of people that like me. There's also a lot of people that didn't, and that's okay. And it gives you the opportunity to support extraordinary candidates such as Nekima Levy-Pounds, such as Representative Raymond, such as Mayor Betsy Hodges, and say, you know what, but here's another person who I like second and third best. I think that is an enhancement to democracy, not a hindrance of it, and I think we're really proud to have enacted that here. The only thing that I would like to change is, you know, Melvin Carter was elected as mayor of St. Paul before I was elected mayor of Minneapolis, and I would just like to say very clearly to Melvin that that's the last time that St. Paul will finish ahead of Minneapolis for a long time. But we're proud. It's a proud day in the Twin Cities as a whole, and I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you so much, Mayor-elect Jacob Frey. I would like to invite up mayoral candidate Ray Dehn. And thank you.
Well, thank you, Vice President Glidden. It's odd to be here today, not being victorious, but I think that's okay. And I think a part of why it's okay is with ranked choice voting, I believe that the voters had the opportunity to really speak. A lot of people have said, oh, elections are so much easier when it's just between two people. I don't have to worry about thinking and all those type of things. Well, I think it's actually good when voters have to think. And I also think the difference between this race and what would be a typical primary and two-person race is, I think from August on, we would have been hearing nothing but negative about each of the top two candidates, because that's what we do. Elections show that if you can suppress voter turnout for your opposition, you have a better chance of winning. And the thing that I loved about this year, other than not winning, was that we had a huge dialogue all the way up until, actually it was Sunday, we had our last forum before the election. So we raised the topic of issues around affordable housing, around police accountability, and addressing issues of climate justice and environmental justice. And I think that, you know, without ranked choice voting, I don't believe we would have had that dialogue. I mean, throughout the whole campaign, the issues of disparities in the city of Minneapolis was one of the primary topics of an election. And I think that that's what, you know, being involved in ranked choice voting does. It allows all of the candidates to be out there to speak to the issues that they're passionate about, and in the end realize that you can like someone number one, you can like them number two, you can like them number three, but really having those options, I think was really one of the driving force, not just in the topics that we discuss and the issues that we discuss, but ultimately around the number of people that came out and vote. So it's a pleasure to be here today, and again, thank you, Jean, and thank you, Vice President Glidden. So thank you all.
I want to invite up mayoral candidate Nekima Levy-Pounds, and I would just also invite everybody else who's a speaker. Why don't you come on up? I think we can stand here together.
Good afternoon. It's a privilege to be here today. I want to thank Jean Massey and all of the staff of Fair Vote for all of their hard work in educating the public about ranked choice voting. I don't think that there was a single forum that I attended out of the 30 or so that the mayoral candidates participated in where there was not at least one person there from Fair Vote. So you all have been amazing at educating the public on what could be a challenging system for people to learn, but you made it a lot easier for people to learn that system. I also want to thank Councilmember Glidden for hosting us this afternoon and putting this issue on the table. Now, I have a very strong interest in what is happening with ranked choice voting because I feel that it had a positive impact on my own race for mayor. As a woman of color, like many other candidates of color, we know that we are in the minority when we are running for political office. And we are in an environment, unfortunately, that is often hostile to conversations surrounding racial justice and equity. And so what I found in going on the campaign trail and meeting people is that there were a lot of white progressive residents of Minneapolis who wanted to vote on behalf of their values surrounding equity and justice, but were also concerned about whether or not they would lose their vote if other residents of Minneapolis weren't quite ready to have that conversation and to take action surrounding that. So ranked choice voting allowed those individuals to take a chance on a candidate like me, on other candidates of color, to say, listen, I will vote for this person because my values are aligned with what this person is saying and what they will do. But if they do not prevail in the race, then I can vote the next the next best person in my mind who could become mayor of Minneapolis. I think that that's very important because communities of color and indigenous populations and our immigrant populations are underrepresented in the electorate. And it plays a huge role in terms of the policies that are on the books, in terms of the laws, the practices, and how resources are allocated. And if we do not open up the doors of democracy to communities of color, we will continue to fall behind as far as our key indicators of quality of life go. It's time for a shift. I think that ranked choice voting helps to usher in that shift. And I hope that more young people of color and true progressives are willing to step up to the plate and not only run for office, but also support those who put themselves on the line to run for office. You have a much greater chance of winning with ranked choice voting. I want to thank the 43,000 plus people who voted for me in this election. It made a huge difference, and I think that the ranked choice voting system played a role in people's willingness to take a chance on me as a Black woman candidate. Thank you.
So we are now going to turn to hearing some perspective about city council races, and I would like to first invite up our council member for the 1st Ward, who just was re-elected, Kevin Reich.
Thank you. And again, thank you to Jean and your advocacy. You are a trailblazer, and of course, Councilmember Glidden, you were there right from the beginning. And I think we benefit from that early insight and advocacy. It's been stated well by the others of how this is really enhancing participation. Participation is the heart and soul of democracy. When it wanes, democracy wanes. When it's thriving and robust, democracy is thriving and robust, and the communities that support this system, we are a shining example in Minneapolis, and I think our numbers were a little higher than St. Paul, even on a percentage basis, so Jacob, you've got that leg up right away. But it's not only just the numerical quantity of participation. I think this is a system that enhances the depth of that participation. You have a system where you can choose several different people who might have a lot of similarities and some dissimilarities, and you can kind of, with your own priorities as a citizen, figure out what's the best mix for you and vote accordingly. It's not this or that, it's a whole range of things. And I think that invites a nuanced approach to campaigning, and it certainly encourages a positive approach. This system rewards a positive statement about what you're about versus dragging the other down. And I think this is a real outcome, can be demonstrated race by race and certainly in my own. So I'm appreciative of the system, I'm appreciative of its success, and of course, things work when they work, and our department and Casey Carl's leadership made sure that this system works, unquestionably, unequivocally, and I commend you for that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin Reich. I would like to invite up our Councilmember-elect for the 4th Ward, Phillipe Cunningham.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Phillipe Cunningham, and I was recently elected to be the next City Council representative for the 4th Ward in North Minneapolis. I just wanted to take a little time today to be able to share why ranked choice voting is, how it really helped me as a marginalized person be able to have a voice in this election. My favorite thing about ranked choice voting has been that it's allowed me to build relationships across bases. It wasn't just either or. And ranked choice voting also allowed my campaign for us to be able to remain rooted in our values. From day one, I wanted my campaign to demonstrate the kind of council member that I will be, and that's to operate with integrity and to be collaborative. And so rather than getting caught up in the divisiveness that we typically see in traditional elections, I was able to build power and relationships across differences all across the ward. We have a very diverse ward in the 4th Ward. And so additionally, I also wanted to add that ranked choice voting allowed me to build power with another candidate, Stephanie Gatska, who had a similar vision and a similar values for what she wanted to see in North Minneapolis. So we were able to work collaboratively together to build relationships together rather than tear one another down. And so now, as a result of that collaboration in the 4th Ward, which typically has very low voter turnout rate, one of the lowest in the city, we saw an increase of 1,400 votes. And also now I am stepping into office with a friend and an ally that I may not have made otherwise. So I am so grateful for ranked choice voting because it allowed me to demonstrate the kind of council member that I will be, which is to operate with integrity and to be collaborative. Thank you, everyone.
And I would like to invite up our Councilmember-elect for the 5th Ward, Jeremiah Bay Ellison.
Thank you all for having me. I'm happy to be here. I think that ranked choice voting is a strong way for us to increase democracy in the city of Minneapolis. A lot of people assume that when they see the end results of the election that, if so-and-so if these two candidates hadn't been in the race, then one of them would have gotten the extra 400, 500 votes that other candidate got and they would have won. But candidates individually build their bases and build their networks of support. And by being able to be positive and being able to run these positive campaigns, we're seeing that, just as Phillipe stated, just as Nekima stated, that this fear, which I think is a genuine fear, that marginalized communities will then, split each other's vote because, if you have two black folks in a race, or if you have two folks of color in a race, that they'll split the vote. And we see that that doesn't need to play out in these races. And so I'm really happy to, be in a system that allows for everybody to exercise their full right and their full thought as a voter. And I'm excited to see how it pursues. I thank the city for being able to have timely results. I don't know what it would have been like for some of the candidates to have to wait 2 weeks for the results, and so being able to know the results in a day was a huge benefit and a huge relief to a lot of us. So thank you all, and thank you.
And we're also honored to have with us Park Board Commissioner-elect for District 3, A.K. Hassan.
Thank you, Elizabeth Glidden, Vice President, and thanks to everyone who came out. And if I tell you a little bit about why I'm a big supporter of the Rangers voting, is the reason why I support, the main reason is because as a candidate, we had to focus on the issue and talking to, the constituents and residents who live in the district, rather than dealing with campaigning and being negative and all kinds of stuff. And the good thing about it is when you're talking to someone, it allows you even to continue the conversation. Even if they don't give you the first choice, you get to hear from them what they really care and ask them their second choice if you're allowed with them. That's one of the favorite part, I like about it. But I also want to thank all the hard work and all the meet and greets that the Rangers vote attended to educate, especially the new immigrants who doesn't know anything about the ranked choice. They'll come to meetings and they'll come to events, which people just talk about ranked choice voting, but yet the ranked choice voting staff and volunteers were there for them to explain and to make sure they know what's happening and to make sure they still have a second choice. That if they don't like the first one, they can still vote. Give a second choice another candidate that they like. So that way their vote doesn't get wasted. So that was a good, smart way, and it's gonna help candidates like us, young people who wants to do good things, to be elected and to be a part and be a voice in our city. Thank you so much.
Thank you to everyone who attended to share your perspective, and I will echo again our thanks to our just amazing election staff at the City of Minneapolis, led by Casey Joe Carl, but I will say he has a deep and very well experienced team. We now want to open for questions, and so I want to invite folks to come on up, and we'll see if there are questions for the participants.
That was us, yes. We contracted with Ellison Research, and we've done so for the past two cycles, third one here in Minneapolis, and so we expect those results sometime next week. Mhm. Sure. Well, we were pleasantly surprised that we didn't need to do the hand count in St. Paul. St. Paul has new voting equipment that's ranked choice voting capable. They simply didn't have the upgrade in time for implementing automated software this year, and they hope to have that by the next election cycle. So with each and every election cycle, the process gets faster and faster, and we're hoping in both Minneapolis and St. Paul that automation is in hand for the next cycles. Correct.
In the Minneapolis races is 3. Do you guys see a difference or any sort of data in terms of like what makes a better difference, or like what's a good threshold for the maximum number of candidates a voter can pick in a ranked choice?
Sure. It's helpful to understand that the limitation of 3 rankings in Minneapolis emerged because of the equipment that was in place when this got started back in 2009, and the equipment simply wasn't capable of counting up to 6 rankings. St. Paul had equipment that could count up to 6 rankings, and it went that far. Again, when Minneapolis is able to have automated software and an upgrade, they can too consider increasing their number of rankings. In most elections, 3 rankings is sufficient, more than sufficient. But when you have highly competitive mayoral elections of this size in Minneapolis and St. Paul, we've seen in other places that voters can tend to go up to 4 or 5 rankings, and we just want to make sure that full choice of preference is available for all voters who wish to take advantage of it. Sure. Correct. Sure. Well, the undervoting, it's hard to ascertain what the reason for that was. We just know that there's drop-off on the ballot for park board in general. We see that in almost every election. This year's was more competitive than another year, so we're hoping to see a bit of an increase in that participation. However, we're very well aware of that misunderstanding in the park board at-large race. That relates a bit to the kind of software upgrade and the kind of ballot design that might come along with software upgrade. There's nothing intuitive about identifying candidates 3 times over in a column. It looks like you have the opportunity to equally rank them. So with better ballot design that can instruct the voter how to properly rank in all those races, we expect to see an improvement. So that's a big part of that, with some additional ongoing education about the need to rank in all of those races. Steve? We reached out to all of the endorsing organizations and encouraged that ranking. It helps those organizations retain the influence they want over those preferences. If you indicate, it's just like a voter, if you indicate one preference, and if by chance that preference is eliminated in a round of counting before the election is over, you've lost your influence. So it's to your advantage. And it's just hard sometimes for organizations with that much institutional practice and memory to make that shift. We're happy that several organizations did in fact rank their preferences. Take Action Minnesota, Sierra Club endorsed in some, and powerfully the Star Tribune endorsed a ranked ballot in several of the races. And that sets the stage for other organizations to do that in the future. All good progress is incremental progress, and we hope to see more organizations participate in that ranking in the next cycle. Yes, several conversations are going on in cities across the Twin Cities and across Minnesota. Most immediately is St. Louis Park, which now has a formal process underway. The City Council has asked the Charter Commission in St. Louis Park to provide a recommendation for the adoption of ranked choice voting that they hope to then enact with unanimous vote by the City Council. And there are several other communities that still have primary elections in odd years, like Bloomington, Minnetonka, Hopkins, that would also greatly benefit from a switch to ranked choice voting simply to eliminate that costly and unnecessary step in the process. Some conversations are beginning in those communities as well as in communities like Rochester and elsewhere. So there is growing interest. I believe the success that we have seen here in Minneapolis and St. Paul this past week will only accelerate those conversations in cities across the state. So, yeah. Yes, I'd like to be able to call on some of the council members here.
Absolutely. That was actually a good exercise for me in building relationships across differences. I was knocking on doors for folks that I knew were supporting other candidates, but I wanted to make sure that they knew who I was, what I was bringing to the table, and to possibly earn their second choice vote. I think that as a result of that, there's been such positive response in the 4th Ward. There is a big change that's going to be underway, but a lot of folks are excited because they invested either their first, second, or third choice in me, and that choice helped them be excited when we were able to win.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the issues as well is that, you know, we're not on TV all the time, right? Like, SNL's not doing skits about our like municipal races here in Minneapolis yet, right? And so you've got people who they've only maybe talked to one candidate so far, right? And so absolutely, we went up to the doors of people who had opponent signs, and you know, in addition to being able to get their second vote, in some cases that person would start following your campaign if they didn't know about you before, and you turn into their first vote. And so yeah, absolutely.
If I can just real quick, I want to just say that my name is spelled Phillipe. It's spelled uniquely, so I wanted to make sure that was on the record. Yes. Yes. Oh, yes. That when you asked that question, that's who I was specifically thinking of.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As a state legislator, some of the big differences that you saw in your time in races when you campaigned as a state legislator as compared to when you were campaigning as mayor. And would you try to advocate then to a ranked choice voting system at the state level? Do you think it has support at the state level?
You know, I can't really think about the differences because I've always run my campaigns in a similar way. I believe that when you're running for the same office as someone else is running, that they're running because they want to make a difference and a positive impact. And anything we do to sort of, you know, create an adversarial relationship, in the end, I don't think is beneficial to the community. Because there may come a time where you have to work alongside that individual, and if that relationship has been soured by negativity, it makes it really, really hard. And, you know, the first time I ran for office, I lost. I ran against a sitting state senator, And I've been working with that sitting state senator, who's now a county commissioner, for the past several years at the Capitol. So I think that those are really important. Is there the political will at the state? If I had to handicap it, I'd say no. That doesn't mean it's not. And if I'm not mistaken, was it Maine? Maine just passed ranked choice voting for their state legislative bodies as well. So I think we're beginning to see a movement towards that. And again, it doesn't take care of everything in elections. I mean, as Jean mentioned, there was some outside money that came in and influenced, and as long as we have our current finance laws in place, we're always going to have that. But the more and more we have candidates out there talking about issues, I think the less and less that influence of outside money will have.
Well, Minnesota is unique. It's not alone, but it's somewhat unique in holding endorsing conventions, especially for local elections. So it's not done widely across the country for all races. What we have seen is that ranked choice voting operates completely independent of party process. So if those endorsing conventions continue in Minneapolis and they continue in St. Paul and they would continue statewide, I assume, if we had a statewide system. What we're seeing is that those processes are taking a shift because voters are looking for greater participation in the outcomes, and so they're not always wanting those conclusions to happen in an endorsing convention. So with or without ranked choice voting, we saw lack of endorsements happening, especially in the mayoral race in Minneapolis, before that process began. So it's not ranked choice, it's not because of ranked choice voting that there may be a shift in attitude towards endorsing conventions, but we're certainly seeing some of that trend.
So I think we're going to call an end to the press conference, but I know that there may be some individual questions available, and I know that Jean and I will remain, and maybe some of the others will as well if there's some more questions after we break up formally. But I want to say thank you very much to all of the participants. We really appreciate your perspective. Thank you to Fair Vote for all you have done to educate and move this process forward. Thank you all.